The air hung heavy with tension, thick with the salty spray of waves crashing furiously against the ship's hulls. The whisper of the wind seemed a sinister omen. In the distance, like spectral shadows, the outlines of long ships emerged, their sails painted in ominous red and black, proudly billowing like battle standards, foretelling an inevitable storm. The city, caught in the vice-like grip of a Viking siege, awoke to chaos, its inhabitants frantically reinforced walls, attempting to hide their provisions from the unwelcome guests. For the Vikings, this was not merely a clash, but a meticulously planned demonstration of strength and strategic prowess. While some warriors sharpened their blades with maniacal gleam, their chieftains, like predatory hawks, scrutinized every detail of the enemy's defenses, searching for vulnerabilities. At the center of this seething activity, like a rock, stood the leader, his gaze piercing the horizon as if he had already claimed victory in his mind. This was not just about a brute force breach, but a test of endurance. The ability to wait until psychological pressure broke the enemy's will. Imagine the despair of the inhabitants watching their hopes crumble, escape routes cut off, supplies dwindling, and the shadow of invasion looming overhead. Every distant sound of a Viking horn seemed like a death knell, a harbinger of imminent doom. This siege was both an act of physical domination and mental subjugation, eroding the city from within before its gates would be broken. There was an almost choreographed precision in the Vikings' movements. They were not mere barbarians, but natural strategists. From the placement of watchtowers to the timing of attacks, everything was meticulously calculated. Archers took key positions, and shields formed impenetrable walls. And though the city appeared impregnable at first glance, the Vikings understood perfectly that the strength of any fortress lay not only in the stones from which it was built, but also in the courage of those who defended it. But who could foresee what would happen when this deadly siege reached its climax? The city, known as Skjoldheim, was a symbol of resilience and prosperity in the harsh lands. Its name, meaning shield home, in the ancient tongue of their ancestors, reflected both its geographical position and the unyielding spirit of its inhabitants. Nestled in a valley protected by mountains and boasting strategic access to the river, Skjoldheim flourished as a bustling trade hub between neighboring lands and distant overseas territories. Its tall, skillfully erected walls not only protected its residents from invaders, but also served as a symbol of pride for a community that considered itself inviolable. The city was renowned for its production of rare metals, especially silver, which, like a magnet, attracted attention and wealth. The people of Skjoldheim possessed a rich and diverse culture, forged by the fusion of ancient local traditions and the influence of merchants traversing their trade routes. The streets teemed with skilled artisans whose hands crafted true works of art, from intricate jewelry to deadly weapons. The central market buzzed with life, filled with a cacophony of voices offering exotic spices, luxurious fabrics, and captivating legends. One of their most revered holidays was Shield Day, when the entire city united to reaffirm their oaths of loyalty and unity. However, it was this very celebration, glorifying Skjoldheim's impregnability, that became an ironic reminder of its vulnerability. The Viking attack was not solely driven by a thirst for plunder and glory. Skjoldheim had become a thorn in the side of their expansionist plans, a trade barrier challenging their dominance. Moreover, persistent rumors circulated that the city authorities had refused to pay tribute to powerful Viking clans. A daring insult that could not go unpunished. For Vikings, whose lives were dedicated to steel and prestige, allowing Skjoldheim to prosper without submission was tantamount to showing weakness, which was utterly unacceptable. Thus, this siege was not just an opportunity for plunder, but a matter of honor, a way to settle scores and remind everyone who truly ruled these lands. The name Ivan the Brave resonated among the Viking clans as a symbol of a fearless warrior and ingenious strategist. He was born into the Ravmaska clan, whose emblem, a black raven on a scarlet field, carried the burden of a great legacy from birth. The clan was renowned for its valor in naval battles and a code of honor that demanded absolute loyalty to the community and a relentless pursuit of glory. Ivan grew up listening to captivating tales of his ancestors, including Skoll, a visionary who predicted a great storm and led the clan to a decisive victory. It was no surprise that in the eyes of his kinsmen, Ivan was more than just a leader. He was the embodiment of a legend, a link between a glorious past and an uncertain future. The Ravmaska clan's culture was deeply rooted in the symbolism of the raven, Odin's sacred animal, the god of wisdom and war. Their rituals often included offerings to Odin, in which they sought guidance before battles or protection on perilous journeys. In peacetime, clan members were skilled fishermen, blacksmiths, and traders, but they never lowered their guard. The education of children was rigorous, weapon training began at an early age, and epic sagas were told around campfires to instill strategic thinking and courage. It was this environment that forged Ivan's indomitable spirit and keen mind. He always sought more than mere survival. He wanted to conquer and expand the boundaries not only of lands, but also of knowledge and influence. Ivan's objectives were clear, but achieving them was no easy task. He was not an ordinary raider driven solely by a thirst for plunder. His attack on Skjoldheim, for instance, was not just a military maneuver, but part of a strategic plan to consolidate power in a key region. Ivan viewed governance as a chess game, where every move had to be carefully planned and calculated. He believed that controlling Skjoldheim would open doors to new trade alliances and strengthen Ravmaska's position among the Viking clans. But there was something more behind it. Ivan sought to create a legacy that would be remembered for generations, a name that would live forever in the songs of Skolls. However, this exorbitant ambition set him on a path fraught with dangers and difficult decisions, where every victory came at a price. Even before the campaign to Skjoldheim, the Ravmaska clan was already steeped in glory, having solidified its position in the Viking world. One of the most striking episodes in their saga was the Battle of Mörkfjord, a daring ambush set for an enemy army that encroached upon villages under Ravmaska's protection. Led by the wise raven, Ivan's father, the warriors glided across the waves in pitch darkness, using the thick fog that enveloped the fjord. Their long ships moved silently, and their strategy was flawless. They struck when the enemies were serenely asleep, turning what seemed like a suicidal mission into a triumphant victory. It was in this battle that the clan adopted the tactic of fighting with black-painted blades, a symbolic gesture that combined practicality with psychological terror. For in the darkness, enemies could barely discern the approaching strikes. Another significant event was the Siege of Frostvik, a small fortress encased in ice and snow, which withstood Ravmaska's assault for weeks. This siege became a true test of the Vikings' physical and moral endurance as they faced harsh cold and hunger. Then, still a young warrior, Ivan distinguished himself by proposing a bold plan. Instead of storming the walls, he suggested cutting off the fortress's only water source, forcing the defenders to negotiate. A risky but effective strategy. After 10 days of hardship, Frostvik's leaders opened the gates in exchange for their lives. This victory not only solidified Ivan's reputation as a promising strategist, but also allowed the clan to gain control of an important trade route. However, the Ravmaska clan's history was not entirely paved with laurels. The defeat at Vine marked a dark page in their annals, where the clan fell victim to the betrayal of a longtime ally. The Vikings were lured into unfamiliar territory and fell into a deadly trap, losing many warriors and almost their entire fleet. Ivan, who survived thanks to his resourcefulness, carried the physical and emotional scars of this event forever. He swore never again to blindly trust alliances and to meticulously calculate every move. This oath shaped not only his strategic thinking but also the character of the clan, which became more reserved and cautious in its endeavors. These battles, full of lessons and sacrifices, set the stage for the campaign to Skjoldheim, where Ravmaska's destiny was to face new trials. The first day of the Skjoldheim siege was a delicate dance between planning and action, where every movement of Ivan's clan was aimed at unbalancing the defenders. With the first rays of sun, Ravmaska's warriors moved. Their scouts, agile as wolves, scoured the city's surroundings, identifying vulnerabilities and studying the guard routines. Ivan understood that victory in Skjoldheim depended not only on brute force, but also on intellect and patience. He divided his forces into specialized groups. One group focused on diversions, another on erecting temporary fortifications, and a third maintained a visible presence to distract the defenders. Preparations began with setting up camps in the surrounding forests, carefully camouflaged from the city dwellers' view. The Vikings erected wooden barricades to protect their positions and dug trenches to prevent sudden attacks. Ivan, ever vigilant, positioned archers on the highest points, ensuring a wide view of the terrain. Meanwhile, the clan's blacksmiths worked tirelessly, sharpening blades and crafting poisoned arrows, a rare and effective weapon capable of turning the tide of a prolonged battle. At the War Council, Ivan emphasized that the first day should not be a show of force, but a test of the enemy's resilience. "Strike where they least expect it," he declared, gazing into the distance. The main objective of the initial assault was to cut off Skjoldheim's supply lines. Ivan knew the city depended on a water source to the south and food caravans from the north. Under the cover of night, small groups of Vikings crept towards the supply routes, felling trees to block roads and poisoning nearby streams. Simultaneously, scouts infiltrated the city's outskirts, setting small granaries ablaze and sowing panic among the inhabitants. These initial sorties were not aimed at destruction, but at creating chaos and confusion, forcing the defenders to make mistakes that could be exploited later. As the second day dawned, Ivan felt that the first piece on the board had been moved, and now he awaited Skjoldheim's counter-move. On the second day of the Skjoldheim siege, Ivan understood it was time to intensify the pressure. The Ravmaska clan's first direct attack was not meant to be a full-scale battle, but a psychological blow designed to sow fear and doubt in the hearts of the inhabitants and defenders. Ivan decided to send a small group of warriors at night to spread terror like wildfire. They were few, no more than 10, but their impact was intended to be profound. They were to paint themselves black from head to toe, adorn themselves with tribal patterns, and outline their eyes with white paint, creating a spectral appearance that would strike terror into anyone who encountered them. The mission was clear: infiltrate Skjoldheim's narrow streets, provoke disturbances, and create a sense that the enemy was everywhere, even when they weren't. They were to act swiftly and silently, destabilizing the city without engaging in open combat. Under the cover of night, as a thick fog enveloped the streets and biting winds swept down from the mountain peaks, the small detachment led by Ivan crept forward. Their actions were audacious and defiant, breaking into homes, setting small fires in warehouses, and, most importantly, leaving ominous markings on walls and doors, runic symbols and claw marks as if belonging to creatures from another world. The purpose of these nocturnal forays was not plunder or large-scale destruction, but to create an oppressive sense of unseen pursuit. As the warriors glided through the city, their ghostly presence sowed panic and fear. The muffled screams of frightened residents, awakened by the sound of breaking doors, echoed in the night silence, intensifying the feeling that the city was surrounded by an unseen enemy, an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and from whom there was no escape. Having completed their sinister mission, the detachment silently retreated into the depths of the forest, where they made camp, leaving the inhabitants of Skjoldheim in a state of profound confusion and terror. With the first rays of dawn, Ivan knew that the consequences of this meticulously planned psychological attack would spread through the city like a poisonous mist, making the already vulnerable Skjoldheim even more susceptible to the next phase of the siege. On the third day of the siege, the atmosphere on the battlefield reached its climax. Ivan, fully immersed in the intricacies of the siege, had prepared this moment as an open confrontation. His intention was clear and precise: to test the true mettle of Skjoldheim's defenders, to demonstrate that the Viking onslaught was not only psychological pressure, but also a real, deadly threat. Tension hung in the air like a thick smog, foretelling the imminent clash, while the roar of waves furiously beating against the rocky shore served as a grim accompaniment to the unfolding events. A sharp northern wind pierced to the bone, portending a day stained with blood, and Ivan was ready to lead his warriors into battle. The attack was planned with meticulous care and attention to detail. Even before dawn, Ravmaska's warriors prepared for the confrontation. Ivan gathered his commanders and gave them clear and concise instructions. The strategy was simple yet audacious: concentrate the main forces at the city's eastern gate, considered the most vulnerable point in the defenses. A second wave of attack was to crash against the northern wall, while reserve forces remained on full alert to intervene if resistance proved stronger than expected. The Viking chieftain knew well that it would not be an easy walk, but he felt an urgent need to bring the battle directly to the city walls, to break the will to resist among Skjoldheim's inhabitants. Under the cover of night, Ivan's detachment advanced silently, their spears and swords glinting ominously in the moonlight. They moved in a unified formation, like an approaching storm ready to engulf the city, each step confident, each movement precise and deliberate. As they neared the eastern gate, the tension mounted with every passing minute. The city held its breath in an ominous silence, as if anticipating the inevitable blow, and then, at Ivan's signal, the Vikings charged, tearing through the night's silence with their thunderous war cries. The battle had begun. Ivan's initial assault proved quite successful. They managed to breach part of the barricade protecting the eastern gate. The first line of defense, consisting of armed citizens and hastily trained militiamen, could not withstand the furious onslaught of the Vikings. Ivan and his warriors attacked with unstoppable ferocity, using the element of surprise to break through to the city's inner walls. However, as soon as the Vikings began to enter the city, the true resistance of Skjoldheim's defenders became apparent. Suddenly, a hail of arrows whistled through the air, raining down on the Vikings with deadly accuracy. Skjoldheim's well-trained and organized defensive forces reacted instantly and cohesively, retreating to pre-prepared strategic positions and offering fierce resistance to the enemy's advance. The battle turned into a desperate struggle for the city gates, where the Vikings desperately tried to break in, while Skjoldheim's defenders clung to their last line of defense. In this chaos, Ivan's warriors moved in coordination, shielding themselves, trying to protect themselves from arrows. But they soon realized that Skjoldheim's true strength lay not only in its walls and archers, but also in the unwavering courage of its warriors. Even under heavy fire, the defenders showed a resilience that Ivan had not expected to encounter. Despite the ferocity and fury of the attack, Ivan's detachment suffered relatively few casualties. The skillful use of shields protected their bodies from arrows and direct blows, and Viking cunning allowed them to avoid most of the damage. Nevertheless, there was a price to pay. Some losses were inevitable, and the cries of pain from wounded warriors mingled with the roar of battle. The fallen warriors were swiftly taken to makeshift field hospitals, where healers desperately tried to save those who could still be saved. Ivan, looking at his wounded, felt a sharp pain in his chest, but there was no time for mourning. the battle continued, and victory was still a long way off. Meanwhile, the intensity of the fighting escalated. Skjoldheim's forces, despite being outnumbered, fought with fierce determination. Ivan understood that his warriors could not simply wait for victory. They needed to storm the walls, and that required more than just brute force. As the Vikings approached the inner gates, the defense became increasingly impregnable. The siege, which at first seemed like easy prey, turned into a true test of endurance for both sides. Hours dragged on excruciatingly slowly, and the siege grew bloodier. Despite the desperate resistance, Ivan knew there was no turning back. At the most intense moment of the advance, a familiar cry rang out. A messenger from Ivan had arrived with news that the defensive line at the northern gate was about to collapse. The Viking chieftain quickly decided to redeploy some of his forces, sending a small detachment to reinforce that position, while the rest continued to fight for the eastern gate. Dividing their forces proved effective as the defenders began to scramble, trying to react to multiple attack fronts. However, as the battle intensified, Ivan began to realize that despite their numerical superiority and fierce leadership, Skjoldheim was not as close to falling as he had imagined. The city, demonstrating extraordinary resilience, showed that the strength of a united and determined people should not be underestimated. Thus, as the Vikings fought with all their might, Ivan understood that this battle was only part of something much larger. Ivan's detachment suffered minimal losses, but the psychological damage of the battle was evident. Skjoldheim's inhabitants, despite their disadvantage, fought with incredible courage, and this made Ivan's victory even harder to achieve. As the day drew to a close and night fell upon the city, the siege was far from over. Ivan knew that this attack, though not decisive, had begun to erode the city's resistance. The true test was yet to come. But now, with the cold northern winds piercing the front lines, Ivan looked at his warriors with renewed determination. The battle had just begun. On the fourth day of the siege, tragedy struck, shaking Ivan's valiant clan to its core. The city forces, driven by desperation, launched a daring night sortie, crashing into the Viking camps. Battle horns heralded a change in fortune, and the city, seemingly resigned to defeat, revealed its hidden strength. Ivan had not foreseen the fury that would descend upon his warriors. The night-own silence was shattered by the clang of swords and war cries. The battlefield, where strategy and order had reigned just moments before, transformed into a chaotic arena of death, where every shadow concealed an enemy and every movement threatened doom. Ivan's men, always ready for battle, were caught off guard. Outnumbered and outgunned, the city forces attacked with the ferocity of the doomed, as if their survival depended on the outcome of the battle. Each warrior of the clan, a bastion of strength and courage, faced the furious onslaught of an enemy striving to turn the tide of the siege. Blades cut through the air and the clang of metal echoed ominously. Ivan and his warriors fought desperately, but the numerical superiority and striking power of the city dwellers proved insurmountable. The ground, stained with blood and mud, bore witness to the deaths of brothers in arms whose gazes, fixed on the sky, froze in silence. The battle, lasting for hours, yielded no clear victor. With the rising sun, the battlefield fell silent in death, strewn with the bodies of 80% of the clan, as if fate itself had severed their connection to life. Ivan, with a handful of 11 survivors, realized the full depth of the catastrophe. The weight of the losses pressed down on him with every step, as if his soul was tearing apart with each life lost. He looked at the fallen warriors, who were not just soldiers to him, but friends, brothers in arms who shared his beliefs, culture, and life. There was no time for mourning, but despair and anger seethed within Ivan. As a leader, he knew he had no right to weakness, but the pain of his clan's near annihilation was unbearable. With each passing moment, he felt the burden of responsibility as the last representative of a clan that once dreamed of world domination, now reduced to a dozen people. Ivan's gaze, once resolute and confident, now reflected loss and tragedy. And yet something within him compelled him to move forward, as if in these last moments, the Viking spirit, the strength of his clan, still lived within him. With this spark of hope, Ivan rose, ready to fight to the end, not only for survival, but also in memory of the fallen heroes. After the crushing defeat, Ivan faced a tormenting choice. His clan, diminished to himself and 11 men, was weakened, but the thirst for vengeance, for restoring former glory, and for retribution for the suffering inflicted was stronger than ever. The flames of loss burned in the warriors' hearts, but the composure of an experienced leader prevailed. Now is not the time, Ivan thought, reining in his seething anger. He surveyed the survivors, those who had shared with him the bitterness of defeats and the triumph of victories. Emptiness gaped in their eyes, but a glimmer of determination still flickered. However, recklessness had no place. Ivan understood that his clan's strength and spirit were insufficient to confront the city in their current state. The city had won the battle, but the war was not yet lost. The retreat was calculated and silent, like a wounded beast withdrawing to regroup and deliver a fatal blow. Ivan's men, exhausted and overwhelmed with grief, followed their leader along winding forest paths that led them away from the battlefield. Ivan ordered silence, knowing that any mistake could be fatal for the remnants of his clan. The leaden sky seemed to reflect the atmosphere of devastation that gripped the warriors' hearts. Not a word was heard, only the soft rustle of footsteps and the howling of the wind, carrying the premonition of retribution. The battlefield left behind still echoed in their minds, but the time for mourning had not yet come. It was time to regroup, devise a plan, and heal their wounds. Having broken free from pursuit and delved deeper into the forest, Ivan and his men found temporary refuge, a place to catch their breath and, most importantly, plan their next moves. It was a strategic respite in the raging storm. Ivan understood that retreat was not a sign of weakness, but preparation for a more powerful and devastating blow. He gathered his warriors and, in a quiet but firm voice, explained the need to wait. The city had underestimated him, but he would not make that mistake again. Ivan was determined to make the city pay for what it had done, but it would be a different attack. He would not let anger blind his mind. It would require patience, precision, and above all, strength. And in time, the city would feel the full might of Ivan's Viking clan. But for now, he would have to wait. The hour of the decisive assault had come, and every step was difficult for Ivan. The gloomy sky, as if foreboding doom, mirrored the oppressive state of his soul. Memories of fallen friends and comrades still bled in his mind, but the thirst for vengeance gradually gave way to a deep, almost sacred awe. Ivan and his warriors had to prepare for the final push. But first, it was necessary to offer a prayer to Odin, the almighty lord of the gods, master of winds and storms, and arbiter of warriors' fates. In a secluded place, surrounded by silence, Ivan organized a humble but significant ritual. The 11 surviving warriors gathered around a blazing campfire. Their faces, filled with determination, also held a glint of reverence, as if they sensed that the outcome of the ritual would determine whether Odin would guide their fury or unleash his wrath upon those who dared defy the greatness of the Norse god. Ivan drew a circle around his small group with stones and branches, creating a makeshift altar in the center. The warriors laid their weapons upon it as an offering, and each in turn raised their hands to the twilight sky. In a unified surge, they called out to Odin, praying for wisdom, strength, and guidance in the coming struggle. In a firm and respectful voice, Ivan uttered words passed down through generations in his lineage. O great Odin, Lord of Valhalla, guide us in this final deed. May our blade be true, our mind sharp as steel, and may the blood of our enemies not be spilled in vain. We, your sons, pray to you to grant us the wisdom to take the city, but to spare the innocent. May the justice we seek prevail, and may your power be with us, for we are but mortals before your greatness. Night fell silently and heavily, as if the world held its breath in anticipation of the coming events. The rain, which had seemed a distant promise, approached rapidly, enveloping the fields and mountains in an impenetrable veil of darkness. Bright flashes of lightning pierced the sky, as if Odin himself was responding to the prayer of Ivan and his warriors. The first rumbles of thunder sounded like a formidable roar, portending something grand. The approaching storm, with its dazzling flashes and torrential rain, was perceived by Ivan as a secret blessing. The natural elements would become his ally this night, concealing the movements of the Viking clan and allowing them to strike with deadly precision. As the storm reached its climax, Ivan gave the long-awaited command. The warriors were ready, their swords sharpened, their daggers clutched in their hands. A veil of rain and lightning enveloped them, but there was no trace of fear in anyone's eyes. The darkness and the roar of the storm added even more drama to the events, but each of the 11 warriors clearly knew their task. They moved like shadows, silent and merciless. Ivan, with his unwavering leadership, led the way. The city, majestic and confident in its impregnability, was completely unprepared for the impending attack. Streets, alleys, buildings, everything was devoid of any defense, for no one expected such a precise, brutal, and stealthy strike. As they advanced, Ivan and his men eliminated sentries with flawless precision, giving them no chance to resist. It seemed Odin had blessed them, and the storm only intensified the fury of their mission. Blades pierced enemies as if they were made of paper, and bodies fell silently to the ground. Ivan's clan did not seek general chaos. Their target was only those who had dishonored their people. The innocent were spared, their homes untouched, their lives preserved. Ivan's goal was clear: revenge, but above all, justice. The city had made a fatal mistake by underestimating the strength of the Viking clan, but Ivan was not a monster. He distinguished good from evil, and his wrath did not cloud his moral principles. The battle raged fiercely, yet remained under control. Ivan's warriors, thanks to their honed combat skills and meticulously developed strategy, advanced, giving the city's defenders no opportunity to regroup. Walls were easily breached, gates shattered by force, and the city, once proud and impregnable, began to feel the full weight of its arrogance. But the final blow had not yet been struck. Ivan felt it as he led his men forward. The storm above them continued to rage, as if Odin guided their every movement. The thunderclaps sounded like a Viking war cry, and the scent of rain, mixed with iron and blood, permeated the air. As the city's last resistance was broken, Ivan stood tall in the very center, his gaze, filled with unyielding will, fixed on the horizon where the fallen city lay at his feet. Fire, destruction, but also a sense of justice served. That was all that remained. He had fulfilled his mission, but at what cost? The fallen bodies, the empty stares of bravely fought warriors, and the spared innocent left an indelible mark on Ivan's soul. He understood that the siege was over, but the price had been immeasurable. With a final glance at his warriors, he whispered, "Odin guided us. Now our honor is restored." After the final battle, an ominous silence settled over the city. Destruction was everywhere, but the fury of Ivan and his men, fueled by the divine power of Odin, had finally brought the siege to an end. The city lay in ruins, but Ivan's clan, Ravmaska, now had the opportunity to rewrite its history. With the demise of their enemies, Ivan and his 11 warriors became the new rulers of Skjoldheim, seizing what once belonged to their foes as a symbol of their victory. Ivan's power rested on strength, but also on wisdom gained from bloody battles, sacrifices made, and lessons taught by Odin himself. The city, now under Ravmaska's control, entered a new era. The echoes of fierce battles gradually subsided, giving way to an authoritative yet just administration. Ivan, along with his battle-hardened comrades, exercised leadership with unwavering resolve, while steadfastly adhering to the principles that had always been the cornerstone of their clan: loyalty, courage, and discernment. The city began to heal its wounds and rebuild, but the heavy burden of the past, the irreparable losses that left an indelible mark on Ivan's soul, served as constant reminders. Nevertheless, he understood that true strength lay in the ability to move forward, learning from experience and ensuring that every action was imbued with the spirit and honor of the clan. Skjoldheim's destiny now rested in the hands of Ivan and Ravmaska, but they knew a path full of new challenges awaited them. New dangers would inevitably arise, new territories would demand conquest, and perhaps enemies fiercer than the last would emerge to test the resilience of Ivan and his clan. However, as always, Ivan was ready to face any challenge with courage, wisdom, and the indomitable spirit of Ravmaska. Thus, the narrative of Ivan and his clan did not conclude with the fall of the old regime. Skjoldheim was merely the starting point of a journey that would span many generations. The name Ravmaska would thunder across the land, inspiring awe and fear, as the name of a clan that rose above an empire whose exploits would be sung by skalds in future sagas, immortalizing the name of Ivan, the invincible chieftain, and his clan, Ravmaska. The story had only just begun its momentum, and the winds of change filling the sails of their next expedition were already felt on the horizon.